My name is Suzanne Martinez, and I am 52 years old. As I stood in my kitchen that Sunday afternoon, stirring the marinara sauce and checking on the garlic bread in the oven, I felt that familiar flutter of excitement mixed with just a hint of anxiety. Tonight was our weekly family dinner, and my daughter Amanda would be bringing her husband Derek, and my precious grandchildren, 5-year-old Emma and 18-month-old James. I had spent the entire day preparing their favorite dishes, wanting everything to be perfect. But lately, Derek had been making these sharp little comments that cut deeper than I cared to admit. Before I continue with what happened that evening, let me ask, where are you watching from tonight? Please hit that like button and subscribe to support the channel. And stick with me as I share how one single decision changed everything in ways nobody could have imagined. Let me paint you a picture of our family dynamics so you understand what led to that terrible night. My daughter Amanda is 28 years old, a dedicated registered nurse who works at the Children's Hospital downtown. She married Derek Thompson 3 years ago, and while I tried my best to welcome him into our family, there was always something about his attitude that rubbed me the wrong way. Derek is 31, works as a software engineer for a tech company, and comes from what he constantly reminds us is a very affluent family in Connecticut. His parents own a successful law firm, and Derek never lets anyone forget about his privileged background. My 2 grandchildren are the absolute lights of my life. Emma is this bright, curious 5-year-old with Amanda's hazel eyes and my late husband's mischievous smile. She loves when I read her stories and help her with simple math problems using colorful counting bears. Little James is just 18 months old, toddling around and getting into everything with that fearless energy that makes you simultaneously proud and terrified. Both children adore spending time at Grandma's house, or at least they used to, before Derek started interfering. My life changed dramatically 8 years ago, when my husband Robert passed away after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. We had been married for 22 years, and losing him left me not just heartbroken, but also financially struggling. Robert had been the primary breadwinner while I worked part-time as an elementary school teacher, so I could be more available for Amanda. After his death, I had to make some tough decisions about money and my career. I took early retirement from teaching and started working as a private math tutor for elementary school children. The pay was decent enough to cover my basic expenses, but I certainly wasn't living lavishly. My house is a modest 2-bedroom ranch-style home in a working-class neighborhood. It is not fancy, but it is clean, warm, and filled with love and memories. I have a small garden where I grow tomatoes and herbs, and I have decorated every room with family photos and Amanda's childhood artwork that I could never bear to throw away. Over the years, I noticed Derek's subtle digs about my financial situation. He would make comments about my older model Honda Civic, suggest that I should consider moving to a senior living community, or mention how Amanda deserved to live in a better neighborhood. Initially, I thought maybe he was just trying to look out for our family's future, but his tone grew increasingly condescending as time went on. Derek grew up in a world where money solved problems and status determined worth. His parents had always provided him with the best of everything, from private schools to expensive cars, and he seemed to genuinely believe that people who struggled financially were somehow lacking in character or intelligence. This attitude became more apparent as I got to know him better, and it started affecting how he treated not just me, but how he expected Amanda to view her own upbringing. The warning signs of Derek's true nature had been accumulating for months, but I kept making excuses because I did not want to cause problems in Amanda's marriage. About 3 months before that awful Sunday, we had all attended Emma's preschool graduation ceremony. Afterward, we went to a family restaurant to celebrate, and some of Derek's colleagues happened to be there with their own families. When they came over to say hello, Derek made a point of mentioning how I drove myself there in my 15-year-old Honda. He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Some people just never learn to manage money properly, but we are working on getting Suzanne into something more reliable. The way he said it made me sound like a charity case, and I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment. Amanda just sat there quietly, not defending me or correcting him. That was the first time I really noticed how she had started enabling his behavior through her silence. 2 months later, we were planning Emma's 5th birthday party. I had offered to bake her birthday cake, something I had done every year since she was born. I make this amazing chocolate layer cake with strawberry filling that Emma absolutely loves. But Derek shut down that idea immediately, saying they had already ordered a custom cake from an expensive bakery downtown. When I asked if I could at least help with decorations or bring some homemade cookies, he responded with, "We prefer professional quality for our daughter's special day." Then professional quality. As if my love and effort was somehow substandard because I was not charging $50 an hour for my baking skills. I still showed up to the party with an expensive present for Emma, a beautiful dollhouse that cost me 2 weeks of tutoring income. But Derek barely acknowledged the gift. Instead, he made sure everyone knew about the professional photographer, the catered food, and the entertainment he had hired. The most painful incident happened just 1 month before our family dinner disaster. Emma had been asking to have a sleepover at Grandma's house, something she had done regularly before Derek came into the picture. When I suggested it to Amanda, she seemed excited about the idea, but Derek overheard our conversation and immediately shut it down. His exact words were, "The house is not exactly up to our standards for overnight stays." Not up to their standards. I had raised Amanda in that house. It was where she took her first steps, where I helped her with homework at the kitchen table, where I held her when she cried over her first heartbreak. But somehow it was not good enough for my own granddaughter to spend one night there. I started noticing changes in Amanda's behavior too. She used to call me several times a week just to chat about her day or ask for advice. Those calls became less frequent. When we did talk, she seemed distracted and would often cut the conversation short. During our visits, she appeared tense and kept checking Derek's reactions to everything I said or did. The most heartbreaking part was watching how Derek's attitude was starting to affect the children. Emma, who used to run straight into my arms when they arrived, began hanging back and looking to her father for permission before hugging me. When I would offer them snacks or small treats, Derek would often intervene, suggesting that Grandma's food might not be as healthy as what they were used to at home. I found myself walking on eggshells around my own family, constantly second-guessing everything I said or did. Was my house clean enough? Were my clothes nice enough? Was the food I cooked good enough? I started to feel like I was failing some invisible test that Derek had created. And worse yet, it seemed like Amanda was starting to grade me by his standards too. Despite all these warning signs, I kept telling myself that things would get better. I convinced myself that Derek just needed time to warm up to me, that his comments were not really meant to be hurtful, and that Amanda would eventually stand up for me if things got too bad. I was wrong about all of that. That Sunday started like any other family dinner preparation. I woke up early around 7 in the morning and began cooking Amanda's favorite meal. Chicken parmesan with homemade marinara sauce and garlic breadsticks. I had bought fresh ingredients the day before, spending more than I usually would because I wanted everything to be special. The chicken was organic, the Parmesan cheese was imported, and I had even splurged on those expensive San Marzano tomatoes for the sauce. While the sauce simmered, I tidied up the house for the 3rd time that week. I vacuumed the carpets, dusted all the furniture, and made sure every surface was spotless. I had bought new toys for the children, simple but educational games that I thought Emma would enjoy, and some colourful stacking blocks for James. I arranged fresh flowers from my garden in a vase on the dining room table and set out the good china that Robert and I had received as a wedding gift. Amanda's family arrived around 4 in the afternoon. Derek walked in first, barely acknowledging my greeting, and immediately pulling out his phone to check messages. He was wearing an expensive-looking sweater and dress pants, the kind of casual attire that probably cost more than my entire weekly grocery budget. Amanda followed behind him, looking tired and stressed, giving me a quick hug before chasing after James, who had immediately started exploring every corner of my living room. Emma ran up to me with her usual enthusiasm, but I noticed Derek watching our interaction with disapproval. When she started telling me about her week at school, Derek interrupted to remind her not to touch anything without asking first. The joy in her little face dimmed slightly, and I felt that familiar pang of frustration at his controlling behavior. During dinner, Derek's criticism started almost immediately. He commented that the chicken was a little dry, asked if I had used low-sodium ingredients, and mentioned that Amanda had been trying to reduce processed foods in their diet. Every observation felt like an attack on my cooking, which had never been complained about before he joined our family. Amanda sat quietly occasionally, agreeing with his suggestions, but never defending my efforts. The conversation turned to Derek's work, and he began talking about a possible promotion that might require relocating to Seattle. My heart sank at the thought of my grandchildren moving across the country. But when I expressed my concerns about the distance, Derek made it clear that geography was not going to influence their decisions. He said that some people needed to prioritize career advancement over local family obligations. As the evening progressed, Derek's mood seemed to worsen. He complained about the temperature in the house, suggested that I should consider updating my furniture, and made several comments about the neighborhood not being as safe as it used to be. Each criticism felt deliberate, as if he was systematically pointing out everything wrong with my life and choices. The breaking point came when little Emma accidentally knocked over her cup of fruit punch. The red liquid spread across the table and dripped onto my light-colored sofa. It was the kind of accident that happens with children all the time, nothing to get upset about. I immediately jumped up to clean the spill, reassuring Emma that everything was okay and that accidents happen. But Derek's reaction was explosive and completely disproportionate to what had occurred. Derek slammed his hand down on the table so hard that the plates rattled and little James started crying. His face turned red with anger, and his voice rose to a level that filled the entire room. "This is exactly what I am talking about," he shouted, gesturing wildly at the spilled juice and my quick efforts to clean it up. "This whole setup is just wrong." I continued dabbing at the spill with paper towels, trying to stay calm for the children's sake. Emma had started crying too clearly, frightened by her father's sudden outburst. Amanda looked frozen in her chair, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. But Derek was not finished. He stood up from the table, towering over all of us, and that is when he said the words that would change everything. "You're nothing but worthless garbage, Suzanne." The words hit me like a physical blow. Amanda deserves better than having her kids exposed to this poverty mindset. You're dragging our family down with your pathetic lifestyle. The room went completely silent except for the children's crying. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach and knocked all the air out of my lungs. In all my 52 years, no one had ever spoken to me with such venom and disrespect, not even during the worst moments of my life, not when I was struggling to pay bills after Robert's death. Not when I was working 3 jobs to put Amanda through college. Had anyone ever called me garbage? I looked at Emma, who was sobbing, and asking why Daddy was yelling at Grandma. I looked at James, whose little face was red and confused as he cried in his high chair. And then I looked at Amanda, waiting for her to say something, anything, to defend me, or at least tell her husband that his behavior was completely out of line. But she just sat there, her mouth opening and closing, like she wanted to speak but could not find the words. Derek continued his tirade, pacing around my dining room like he owned the place. This house, this neighborhood, this whole situation is beneath what Amanda grew up expecting from life. I'm tired of pretending that this is acceptable for my family. Something inside me snapped, but not in the way Derek probably expected. Instead of yelling back or breaking down in tears, I felt an eerie calm wash over me. I had spent months walking on eggshells around this man, making excuses for his rudeness, and trying to keep peace for Amanda's sake. But hearing him call me garbage in front of my grandchildren was the final straw. I stood up slowly, my voice steady and quiet when I spoke. I think it's time for you to leave. Derek seemed surprised by my calm response. He had probably expected me to cry, or argue, or beg for forgiveness. Instead, I walked to the front door and held it open, maintaining eye contact with him the entire time. You heard me, I continued in that same calm tone. Get out of my house, now. Derek's face grew even redder, and he started shouting about how I could not throw him out, how I was proving his point about being unstable, and how Amanda needed to choose between her husband and her mother. But I did not engage with his tantrum. I simply stood at the door, waiting for him to leave. Amanda finally found her voice stammering apologies and trying to smooth things over, but I was done with compromises. Take your children and go with your husband, I told her quietly, and don't come back until you're ready to have a real conversation about respect. Derek stormed out, still yelling insults over his shoulder. Amanda gathered up the children, whispering frantic apologies that felt hollow and meaningless. As they drove away, I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding, but my mind surprisingly clear. I was done being treated like garbage. And tomorrow, Derek was going to learn exactly what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. I did not sleep that night. After cleaning up the dinner mess and washing the dishes, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, staring at the family photos on the refrigerator. There was Amanda's kindergarten graduation picture, her college graduation, where she had thanked me in her speech for sacrificing so much to make her education possible, and recent photos of Emma and James that filled me with both love and heartbreak. For hours I replayed every moment of Derek's verbal attack, but instead of feeling sorry for myself, I felt something else entirely. Anger, yes, but also a kind of clarity I had not experienced in years. I remembered the woman I used to be before Derek made me start doubting myself. I remembered how I had advocated for my students when their parents or administrators treated them unfairly. I remembered how I had fought the insurance company for months to get Robert the treatment he needed. I remembered that I was not and had never been garbage. Around 3 a.m, I pulled out a notebook and started writing down everything I could remember about Derek's job, his company, and the conversations we had shared over the past 3 years. He worked for TechFlow Solutions, a mid-sized software development company that prided itself on innovation and ethical business practices. I remembered him mentioning his boss, the CEO named Harrison, and how the company had recently won some kind of award for workplace culture. Derek had always been eager to talk about his work, especially when he was trying to impress people with his importance at the company. Over the months, I had listened to him brag about client relationships, company policies, and his role in various projects. At the time, I had just been trying to show interest in his career, but now I realized that information might be useful in ways he never intended. I also started thinking about some things I had noticed, but never really processed. There was the time Derek had grabbed Emma's arm too roughly when she was not listening to him, leaving a small bruise that Amanda had explained away as rough play. There were his social media posts that showed a pattern of arrogant behavior and dismissive comments about people he considered beneath him. There were the stories he told about conflicts with co-workers that always painted him as the victim of other people's incompetence. By sunrise, I had filled several pages with notes and had formed the outline of a plan. I was not going to seek revenge in the way Derek might expect. I was not going to create drama or make demands or threaten anyone. Instead, I was going to do something that Derek's privilege and arrogance had never prepared him for. I was going to hold him accountable for his actions through the proper channels. I showered, put on my best navy blue suit, the one I used to wear for parent-teacher conferences, and spent extra time on my makeup and hair. Today was not about looking like someone's poor mother-in-law. Today was about presenting myself as the educated professional woman that I had always been, even if Derek had made me forget it for a while. At 9 o'clock sharp, I placed my first phone call to Tech Flow Solutions. I asked to speak with someone in human resources about a concern regarding employee conduct. The receptionist transferred me to a woman named Jennifer who handled employee relations. I explained that I was calling as a concerned community member who had witnessed behavior that might reflect poorly on the company's reputation and values. Jennifer was immediately attentive when I mentioned that this involved an employee who had publicly displayed aggressive and inappropriate behavior toward family members, including small children. I did not go into detail about the personal aspects of the situation, but I did mention that I had documentation of concerning incidents and would appreciate guidance on how to proceed. She transferred me to the company's ethics hotline, where I spoke with another representative who took detailed notes about my concerns. They explained that TechFlow took all reports seriously and that they would need to investigate any credible allegations of employee misconduct that could impact the company's reputation or workplace culture. My second call was to the CEO's office directly. I had found the company directory online and knew that Mr. Harrison prided himself on maintaining an open-door policy for community concerns. His executive assistant, a professional woman named Carol, listened carefully as I explained that I had information about potential character and conduct issues involving one of their software engineers. I was careful to frame my concerns in terms of business reputation rather than personal grievances. I mentioned that I had observed patterns of aggressive behavior, poor judgment in social situations, and attitudes that seemed inconsistent with the company's stated values. When Carol asked for more specifics, I mentioned that I had documentation and would prefer to discuss the matter in person with someone in leadership. To my surprise, she was able to schedule an appointment for that same afternoon. Mr. Harrison apparently took these kinds of reports very seriously, especially when they involved potential liability issues or threats to the company's reputation in the community. I spent the rest of the morning organizing my documentation. I printed screenshots of Derek's social media posts where he had made disparaging comments about service workers, shared offensive memes, and generally displayed the kind of attitude that most companies would find embarrassing. I also printed photos that showed the bruise on Emma's arm from when Derek had grabbed her, along with text messages from Amanda explaining it away. But the most powerful piece of evidence was something Derek did not know I had. During one of our family dinners, when Derek had been drinking and had become particularly nasty in his comments, I had used my phone to record part of our conversation. The recording clearly captured Derek making crude jokes about his co-workers, bragging about taking credit for other people's work, and expressing views about women and minorities that any modern company would find deeply problematic. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I walked into the TechFlow Solutions building wearing my best professional outfit and carrying a folder of carefully organized documentation. The building was impressive, all glass and steel, with motivational quotes about integrity and teamwork displayed prominently in the lobby. As I waited to be called into Mr. Harrison's office, I felt nervous but determined. Mr. Harrison turned out to be a distinguished-looking man in his early 60s with grey hair and kind eyes. He listened carefully as I presented my concerns, not as a bitter mother-in-law seeking revenge, but as a community member worried about the character of people representing his company. I explained that I had witnessed behavior that suggested serious problems with judgment, anger management, and respect for others. When I played the recording of Derek's inappropriate comments, Mr. Harrison's expression grew increasingly serious. When I showed him the social media posts, he shook his head in obvious disappointment, and when I mentioned the incident with my granddaughter, his concern shifted to alarm about potential liability issues. What happened next was something I had not expected. Mr. Harrison thanked me for bringing these concerns to his attention and then shared something that made my heart race. The company had been conducting an internal investigation into some financial irregularities in Derek's department, and they had received complaints from clients about his unprofessional attitude during meetings. My documentation provided crucial character evidence that helped complete a picture they had already been developing. The consequences of my decision unfolded faster than I had anticipated. Within 48 hours, Derek was terminated from his position at TechFlow Solutions. The company's investigation had revealed not only the character issues I had documented, but also evidence of Derek using company resources for personal projects and taking credit for work completed by his colleagues. The financial irregularities they had been investigating turned out to be connected to Derek's misuse of client billing hours. Amanda called me on Tuesday evening, crying so hard that I could barely understand what she was saying at first. When she finally calmed down enough to speak clearly, she told me that Derek had been fired and that they were facing serious financial problems. He had been their primary income source, and they had been living beyond their means based on his salary and the assumption of continued advancement in his career. But what broke my heart was not Derek's situation. It was the realization in Amanda's voice that she was finally seeing her husband clearly for the first time. She apologized over and over for not defending me for allowing Derek to treat me so poorly and for losing sight of the values I had raised her with. She asked if we could talk, really talk about what had happened and how they could move forward. I agreed to meet with Amanda, but I made it clear that Derek needed to acknowledge his behavior and seek professional help before I would consider rebuilding any kind of relationship with him. I was not interested in revenge or punishment, but I was also not willing to pretend that his treatment of me and the children was acceptable. Over the following weeks, several interesting developments occurred. Derek was forced to move back in with his parents in Connecticut while he looked for new employment. The job market in his field was competitive, and the circumstances of his termination made finding new positions challenging. His parents, who had always enabled his arrogant behavior, were apparently not pleased about their 31-year-old son moving back home under these circumstances. Amanda started attending therapy, both individual sessions, to work through her own issues with conflict avoidance and couples therapy with Derek to address the fundamental problems in their relationship. For the first time in years, she and I began having honest conversations about respect, family values, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Most importantly, my relationship with Emma and James began to heal. Amanda brought them to visit me regularly, and I could see the difference in their comfort level when Derek was not around to monitor every interaction. Emma started asking to have sleepovers again, and I was thrilled to say yes. James, who was just beginning to talk more, started calling me Grandma Susie in the sweetest little voice that made my heart melt every time. I also discovered something about myself during this whole experience. For months, I had been allowing Derek's treatment to make me feel small and worthless. But taking action to hold him accountable reminded me that I was not the helpless victim he had tried to make me into. I was a woman with experience, education connections, and the ability to advocate for myself and my family when necessary. I started volunteering at a local domestic violence shelter, helping other women who had been made to feel worthless by people who were supposed to love and respect them. Many of these women were surprised to learn that emotional abuse could be just as damaging as physical violence, and that setting boundaries was not only acceptable, but necessary for healthy relationships. The most profound lesson I learned was that respect is not something you can beg for or earn through appeasement. Respect is something you demand through your actions and the standards you set for how others are allowed to treat you. For too long, I had been hoping that kindness and patience would eventually win Derek over. But I had been fighting the wrong battle entirely. As I sit here today, 6 months after that terrible Sunday dinner, I can honestly say that my family is healthier and happier than it has been in years. Derek eventually found a new job, though, at a significantly lower salary than what he had been making before. More importantly, he completed an anger management program and has been working with a therapist to address his issues with control and respect. Amanda and Derek's marriage is still a work in progress, but she has learned to set boundaries and speak up when his behavior is inappropriate. She has also reconnected with the strong, independent woman I raised her to be, the one who had gotten lost somewhere along the way in trying to keep her husband happy. Looking back, I realized that the moment Derek called me worthless garbage was actually the moment I stopped being willing to accept garbage behavior from anyone. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is not matching it with more cruelty, but responding with calm, decisive action that demonstrates your true worth. I learned that when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. But I also learned that people can change when they face real consequences for their actions, and when they are motivated to do the hard work of becoming better versions of themselves. Today, as I watch Emma help me plant new flowers in the garden, and listen to James giggle as he chases butterflies around the yard, I am reminded that standing up for yourself is sometimes the greatest gift you can give to the people you love. My grandchildren are learning that Grandma Susie is not someone who accepts disrespect, and more importantly, they are learning that they do not have to accept it either. The final lesson I want to share is this: your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to see it. You are not garbage just because someone treats you that way. And sometimes when you respond to disrespect with quiet strength and appropriate action, you do not just change your own situation, you change everything. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to stand up for yourself in a family situation? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this video. If my story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that their worth is not negotiable. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter what anyone else might try to tell you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.